Yo, 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 it's your boy KT, Kenny T, Kilo, Tango, Aviation. We're gonna talk about chair flying today. Probably the most valuable thing you can do to improve yourself as a pilot and prepare you for any flight that you're gonna do. This works at any level, whether you're a private pilot, commercial pilot, airline pilot. Chair flying is key to winning. Now, everybody always probably tells you, your instructors, your friends, everybody tips, make sure you chair fly. That's gonna be very valuable. But how do you chair fly? How do you do it? I'm gonna give you a few tips and I'm gonna give you some examples on how you chair fly. When you're chair flying, you wanna make sure you're putting yourself in the mental space and the physical space of what it's gonna be like when you fly. So sitting down in the proper position with your checklist, with your knee board, with all the things that you'd have when you go fly. And you want to practice alternatives. So what if scenarios? So if you're practicing steep turns, you want to practice, all right, what am I going to do if I'm high? What am I going to do if I'm low? What if I do if I'm increasing speed, decreasing speed? Practice doesn't make perfect. Practice makes permanent. So you got to make sure that the things you're doing are the accurate things you're doing. Makes sense, right? So when you're chair flying, you don't need anything special. You can chair fly in just an office chair and a wall. That's all you need to chair fly. You just have to imagine the cockpit that you're flying in, have your checklist, and go through the different flows for the different procedures you're going through. So when you first start chair flying, one thing you gotta look at is your setup. How are you setting yourself up? Well, start with a chair and a wall. Now, if you have a cockpit poster, that makes it even better because then you have a good representation of the airplane that you're flying directly in front of you. This is something, like I said, is the first time you do this, you're going to be just getting familiar with where everything is and with what the flows are. Flows? What are the flows? Well, that's the flow of the checklist. My recommendation is when you start off with all of the basic stuff. How do you turn the airplane on? Pre-flight inspection, before taxi checklist, all of the things that you're gonna have before you even get in the air. Because if you can't even do that, getting in the air, doing the maneuvers, you're not even gonna know where stuff's at. So get familiar with where everything is. Next, big tip, when you're running through it, don't just do this. It's gonna look like that, like I said the first time. You're gonna be sitting here like line one, second thing, third thing. You're gonna do this over and over. At a certain point, you wanna make sure that you're able to do it the way that you would do it in the airplane. Likely, you'll have one hand on the yoke while you're doing all the different procedures. For your checklist, maybe not so much on the ground, but once you get in the air, you're gonna have the yoke. In one hand, you're gonna be running the checklist. So you're gonna have to be really familiar with it. I'll give an example for how you're gonna do your checklist or your flow in the air, and we're gonna practice it on the ground. Your before landing checklist. It is the checklist that you will do so many times that you should have a flow down. So don't do this. Before landing checklist. Fuel selector here. Hold up, I'm on the right checklist. Because when you get in the airplane, you're gonna be fumbling, looking for the checklist. Like, where is the checklist? Seatbelts, secure. Fuel pump, both. Mixture rich. Carb heat on. Landing lights. Where's my landing lights? And let's see, what else we got here? Primer. Let's see. Primer is there. And that's just how it goes when the first time you do it. You're gonna be running through very slow, but eventually you will get the flow. Fuel selector both, mixture rich, carb heat on, landing lights on, primer in and lock. It'll be easy, but that only comes from practice and practice and practice and practice. Same thing with the maneuvers. If you're doing steep turns to the left and right. All right, we're clearing left, clearing right. I'm going to bank into the turn, add a touch of power, have coordinated control, so use my rudder to keep the ball centered. As I'm going through the turn, I'm looking where the horizon is cutting across the cowling, and I'm maintaining and keeping it there. As I'm keeping it there, if the nose drops or I lose altitude, I'm gonna give a little bit of back pressure, or decrease my bank to get back to altitude, then bank it back and look for the horizon to go through that part of the cowling. Now, you see, as I'm doing this, I'm using my muscle memory to do this, and I'm adjusting the way that I would do it in the airplane. Now, if you want to level up your game, when you're not at home or whether it's a cockpit poster, next thing you should do is hop in the airplane an hour before you gotta fly and sit in there and go do your procedures in the airplane with the actual knobs and the actual controls. And this is another place that you can do your chair flying, right here in the airplane. Get your checklist, run through your procedures from beginning to the end. You can do all of it right here with all the same switchology. You get to actually see the instruments that you see and feel the controls that you feel when you fly in the airplane. So this is how I would do my chair flying if I'm practicing power on stalls. Similarly, I got my mixture in, but I'll go airspeeds 60, airspeed slowing down, get to 60, full power, all the way in, back pressure looking for the horizon, going above the horizon, airspeed's bleeding off. I got right rudder, watching. I have the stall horn, feel the buffet, nose drops, max, relax, roll wings level. This is why you practice it the way that you're gonna fly it, because if I'm doing this while I'm flying, fuel selector both, mixture's rich, primer's in and locked, seatbelt secure, carb heat is on. Okay, I just did the before landing checklist. What's wrong with the way that I chair flew that? We know what's wrong. I'm doing like this. When you're actually flying the plane, you have your hand on the yoke, you're flying it, and you got your before landing checklist. So what are you actually gonna do when you actually do the checklist in the airplane? Do it just like that. So a couple things you can do if you're still trying to get used to flying with the checklist and doing the checklist, you do it like this. So you need to pick it up so that you're not taking your eyes outside of what you're looking at. One thing at a time. Fuel selector, both. Mixture rich, primer lock. Mixture rich, primer locked. Carb heat on. That's one way to do it, and that's what you'll probably do when you're first getting used to doing it. Here's a better way. You should actually practice to understand what the checklist is, then correct it if you missed anything. So fuel selector, mixture, primer, seatbelts, carb heat. Come up with a way that's gonna help you figure out what the flow is for the checklist. So when you're flying along and you're downwind and you wanna do your before landing checklist, here's what you're gonna do. Here's a tip for you. Seatbelts, fuel selector, mixture rich, carb heat on, landing lights on, primer in and locked. At that point, I want from here, floor, up and across. So floor to the door. And you can practice this by chair flying. But you see that when you're flying the plane, you keep your hand on the yoke. When you practice by doing like this, you're not really getting the right flow that you can translate to being an airplane. Practice doesn't make perfect. Perfect practice makes perfect. Practice makes permanent. So you're gonna end up practicing the wrong things if you don't do it right. Which is why the addition of having another person with you when you chair fly could be beneficial too. All right, so that's it. Use the cockpit to run through all your procedures. That's a good way to chair fly. We've done it a couple different ways so far. Showed you how to do it with the cockpit poster on the wall, and I showed you how to do it in the airplane. But now I'm gonna show you another way that you can chair fly that's really beneficial. That's using the flight simulator. But I'm gonna caution you, the flight simulator, there's a couple good things and bad things about using the flight sim for chair flying. Probably the biggest benefit is you can kind of see what's actually going on when you're actually running through the maneuvers, so you can actually put the inputs and the corrections. The downside, it's not gonna be as accurate as the airplane, so just take that with a grain of salt as it is. The other thing is, there's a real thin line between chair flying in the simulator and just messing around and playing in the simulator. And we know how that goes. You start working on what you're supposed to. Next thing you know, you start doing barrel rolls in a 172, and then you're in formation flying with an F-18. So just make sure that when you're setting your time to do your chair flying in the sim, you do your chair flying in the sim. I'm gonna go ahead and show you example of how to do. It's not as sensitive, or it's actually more sensitive than probably in the real airplane. So just something that you gotta contend with, but not really bad. And it gets you to think about how fast you actually gotta run through the procedure and checklist and how much time you have. So like I gotta run the before landing checklist. All right, I got fuel selector both, mixture rich, no carb heat here, but carb heat on, landing lights on, seatbelt secured. All right, I'm a little bit high, I'm gonna reduce power. Get back to 22,000 RPMs. I'm gonna beam my point. I got throttle 1700 first notch of flaps. All right, airspeed, I'm going for 80 knots. So back pressure for airspeed, 45 degrees. Clear left. And so I'm actually turning left and looking like I would in the airplane. Maryland traffic, November 12345, turn to base, runway 20, Maryland. All right, pitch back and trim. I'm gonna trim for 80. Are we looking? Rolling out. We want 75 knots. So I'm 72. I'm gonna release a little bit of back pressure. Trim, trim, trim. Looking outside, looking back forward. Aim point, airspeed. Airspeed go low, release a little bit of back pressure, add power so I don't descend too fast. These are the things that I'm chair flying, is thinking about how I'm actually going to maneuver in the plane and the things that my inputs that I'm going to put in to help me out. Clear left. All right, I'm slow. I'm going to release back pressure. I'm add a little bit of power to stop my descent, get my airspeed back. Second notch flaps. Forgot the second notch flaps there, see? And then last notch of flaps. I'm getting slow. I got 60 knots. I'm low, so I'm going to add power, get my speed back. We want 65 knots. So I'm kind of bringing it in here. So add power, get my speed back. Line back up with the runway. Oh yeah, I'm real slow. Pitch for airspeed, I got 65. Pitch for airspeed, power for altitude. Glide slope's a little low, add a little bit of power. I got 60 knots coming in, that's good. Back pressure to slow down, reducing my power. Let the airplane come down. Oh, looking down the end of the runway. Well, flared way too much. All right, I'm on the ground. So, as we see there, so that right there kind of shows how we got the good timeline when we're flying in the sim, practicing for chair flying. Now, like I said, it ain't perfect, but man, it gets a really good sensation for the timing that you get, so that when you get in the air, you realize how fast you got to run through these maneuvers, because that can sometimes get lost when you're doing the chair flying just in the airplane alone or just using the cockpit poster. So bring that into your cross check as a good way to help you chair fly. Now, I wouldn't skip doing the other stuff and jump to the sim, because you're gonna miss out on actually how to run the procedures, because it's kind of hard to run the checklist as good as you should be able to do in the simulator, as opposed to getting the muscle memory of where it's at when you're sitting with the cockpit poster on the wall. Get the cockpit poster, sit in front of the chair and do that. Get in the real airplane if you can, run through the procedures there, and then hop in on the sim. And that's a good way to round out your chair flying. There you go, KT, Kilo Tango, out.